What is going on, guys? Grave here. Today I'd like to talk about a recent interview that happened just a few days ago with one of the ESO devs that was discussing game difficulty. And this is something that a lot of people have been discussing in ESO in the community for several years now. I made a video a few days ago discussing this myself, talking about how I would like to see some changes and how the community has always wanted to see some changes. So let's go ahead and hop right into what was said. Now, this is coming from Jason Barnes, which is one of the ESO story and open world developers. And they, of course, were asked in this interview. It was a roundtable interview. There's a lot of different topics being thrown out there. But one, of course, that was asked was difficulty in game. And they said there is an ongoing plan for that. And it is in the works. We're not ready to talk about it yet, but we've acknowledged it openly. And it is something we're looking at. And there's people working on it. I'll leave it at that. And that is the end of the quote there. So this does acknowledge that they are definitely not just talking about and reading the feedback from the community, but it's something they're actually working on. By saying we have people working on it, that means it's probably something we will see down the road in ESO, hopefully, maybe as early as next year's update. Personally, I could be completely wrong. I don't think it's something we see this year. It could be kind of a surprise for something at the end of the year, but I would have assumed if it's something they are working on for this year's season pass, that would have probably been mentioned by someone already. I would just guess. Usually they kind of lay out all their plans, or if they don't lay out their plans, they will leave it to like they've done in the past, where it says Q3 or Q4 DLC. It'll just kind of have a little question mark or more information to come later, something like that. We pretty much know the roadmap for this entire year. So this would be kind of a big surprise to me if they did acknowledge this this year and actually come out with some kind of change. I would assume, that we'll probably see this next year. I've talked about this in several videos. I think that ZOS is going to start going back to old systems, old zones, and doing stuff like that with future season passes. They said this is just a bridge year. Things are going to look different with the season pass going forward after this year. So that's my kind of thought process on this. I really do think you could probably see this being one of the big kind of just parts in general of a future season pass. They kind of lead with the next year's, direct, and they say, hey, look, we're looking into completely overhauling this year all of the overland content, dungeon content, trial content. Who knows what all this is going to involve. And that is going to be one of our big focuses. We're going to go back to such and such old zone, add some new things, do some new things. But the big focus this year is going to be overland content difficulty, dungeon content difficulty, whatever the case may be there. Now, in that past video I made, I said I would like to see some type of system. It doesn't have to be the exact same type of system like Diablo has, where you have different world tiers, where you actually can go in there and turn on the tiers to be, you can play this on normal if you're a brand new player, or if you're a person that does not want to have to contend with harder difficulty in overland content or, dungeons or trials or whatever the case could be there. You could turn that on and say, I want to play base difficulty, or bump it up 1 notch, 2 notches, or as many as they want to give you to something where it's like crazy what like they would have with a Diablo in the nightmare mode or something like that. I think that would be a very neat solution. I do see some issues with that probably on their end, considering this game was in development back all the way in 2007 when they first started making it. There's a lot of things probably on the back end they would have to do here to make that work correctly. A lot of people just suggest that they go in and bump up the health of enemies and things like that. To me, that doesn't necessarily always make it more difficult. That just makes the enemies have more health, if that makes sense. To where if you can just run through things right now, just because it has a bit more health, doesn't really mean that it's going to be more difficult. It's going to take a little bit longer to, kill, something like that. So I think actually adding in some different ways to make these enemies more difficult. I even could look at Halo, for example. If you're an old school fan of video games, if you're old as I am personally, and you played video games for a long time, you look at like Halo 1, Halo 2, just the campaign of that. If you're a first person shooter fan, you had the different skulls you could turn on to make the game more difficult, to make enemies do a certain thing, act differently, give them more health. have different overshields, things like that. Just how they interact with you while you're playing the story. And that could be done once again in this as well. Something that you could have an option to, if you wanted to, make the overland content, the dungeon content, and the trial content more difficult if that's what you're looking for. Turn on some type of either system that controls all of that, or have individual systems that control each one of those depending on what you want to have less or more difficulty on. I think that would be a really cool idea, and I think a lot of people would really like this. But I'm also looking for a system, if no matter what they do, whatever difficulty you have this set to. So if you're running the base game difficulty, you're still getting the same drops that you always have. But if you decide to turn this up, and if there's different tiers, each tier has better rewards. So you're getting more gold, better gear, better rolls on your gear. Even, for example, a lot of people say you play a vet dungeon or a vet trial, your gear drops are going to be in purple. Of course, you get gold rings and jewelry and things like that in vet trials. But what if overland content was something that was really difficult, like a top tier? It dropped you really good rolled gear for what more people would be looking for, and it would be maybe already golded out. Something like that. Any way that they can give you more for doing harder content, more XP. That would be great for XP grinders out there. I'm going to turn up the world tier for everything I do to the hardest difficulty I can, and that's the way I'm going to grind my XP out. So there's a lot of ways they could do this. I was just really happy to see this answer from Jason Barnes when it was asked. Not really to avoid the question or, whatever, however you want to say that. A lot of times devs will kind of answer the question but not answer it at the same time. This was actually an answer by saying they're looking at it and people are actually working on it. So I'm assuming at some point, probably won't be this year, like I said, we will get some more information about this. I hope we actually get a lot more information about this year, but we'll kind of have to just wait and see. Leave me a comment with your thoughts. Let me know down in the comment section how you would like to see difficulty implemented into ESO. Do you only want it for overland content, or would you like to see it across the board and have options to change that no matter what you're playing? Leave me a comment with your thoughts, and of course, if you liked it, hit the like. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.